So today we're talking about synthetic division, which is kind of like a different way of doing long division, but it's a lot nicer and easier. Okay, so you have like a polynomial, x squared plus 3x minus 5, and you want to divide that by another polynomial, x plus 3, x minus 3, whatever. You divide them. So synthetic division can help you divide that, but the only problem is that your divisor, which is this guy, for synthetic division, it can only be of the form x plus a, meaning x plus a number or x minus a number is the only time that will work. Okay, so if you have like x squared or whatever, that will not work with synthetic division. So that's the hard part about this. The bad part about it won't work for other forms. Like you can't have an exponent on here. You can't have a coefficient in front of x. But you have x minus 3, it'll work. X plus 3, it'll work. Okay, so let's learn how to use that. So I have example number 1 here. So I have this. Okay, so this long polynomial, I want to divide that by this. So I have 5x to the fourth minus x cubed plus 4x minus 2 divided by my x plus 5. Now, first I look at this guy. Is that going to work? Okay, is it in the form x plus a? Yes, it does work, right? So what I do is I'm going to make a little box like so, and then I'm going to line my numbers up here. I take the coefficient of each number, like 5, -1, and stuff, but I have to put them in order. So I have to, so I have to imagine this is my x to the fourth here, x cubed, x squared, x term, and just a random number in the back, right? That number has no x. So what is the coefficient of x to the fourth? I have a 5. Okay, what's the coefficient of x cubed? -1. What's the coefficient of x squared? There is no x squared here, so I have to put a 0. And then what's the coefficient of x? 4. And what's my constant in the back? -2. Okay, so make sure you line them up in order of the exponent. If there is an exponent that is missing, like the x squared, there's no x squared here, you have to put a 0. Okay, and then you have to figure out, you take your divisor, okay, x plus 5, and you see what value of x makes it equal to 0. Well, x has to be -5. So you put -5 out here. All right, the first step is to bring down the first number. So I have 5 here. And then you take this number here and you multiply to that number there and you put it here. So 5 times -5 is -25. And then you add these two, you get -26. And you repeat the steps. So take this, multiply to -5. So that gives you positive 130. And then you add these, you get 130. And you multiply across here back again. I have, let's see, 500, 650 negative. And you add these, you have -646. And you multiply again, I have positive 3,230. And you add these, you get 3,228. The last number is always your, now your answer is going to be, you just put the x's that is 1 lower than this, right? So it's going to start with x cubed. So I have x cubed minus 26 x squared in order like that. And then this is a positive, so I have to put a plus. Plus 130x minus 646 plus your remainder. The remainder, you have to put that over your divisor. So all that over x plus 5. All right, so ultimately, your answer comes out to be 5 x cubed minus 26x squared plus 130x minus 646 plus 3,228 over x plus 5. Okay, so this one is a remainder. That means that it doesn't go in evenly. That means that this is not a factor of that, right? It's just kind of like how you have 12 divided by 5, and you get like 2 and some remainder, right? 2 over 5. See, that means that 5 is not a factor of 12 because when you divide, you have a remainder. But if you take 12 divided by 6, you get just 2, no remainder. That means that 6 is a factor and 2 is a factor. But this guy is not a factor of that because it has a remainder when you divide. But in the end, this is what you get when you divide that. Okay, I'm going to do a couple more examples here. Example 2, I'm going to divide again. And so when I look at this guy here, is it of the form x plus a? This is x minus 5. Is it the same thing as x plus a? Well, it does work, okay, because x minus 5 is like x plus negative 5. So it does work, okay? So you can do synthetic division with this. So make a little box. You line up your numbers. You start with x squared, right? So I need a number for x squared, 1 for x, and 1 for your constant. What is the coefficient of x squared? 2. What's the coefficient of x? Negative 7. And the constant is 10. So here, I got that, and then I've got to find out x minus 5. What value of x makes it equal to 0? Well, x has to be equal to 5. So I put a 5 out here. And I drop the 2 down. And then I take 2 times 5 is 10. Add these, I get 3. Take 3 times 5, I get 15. Add these, I get 25. Last number is remainder. So my answer is 2. You take one exponent lower than this, so it's just 2x to the first power plus 3 plus 25 over x minus 5. And that's just the process of synthetic division. All right, so let's go on to example number 3 here. So when you have a function like this, they give you a function like this, and they give you a 0. X minus 3 is a 0. That means that x plus 2 is equal to 0. So x is equal to negative 2. That's all it's saying, right? And then they want you to find the other zeros, which means that you just take the function and you divide by this. So you take x cubed minus 9x squared plus 8x plus 60. You take that and you divide it by x plus 2. And you get whatever is the result of that. And that basically from this, you can find the other zeros, because when you have factors that are multiplied together, like x plus 2, x plus 3, x plus 4 equal to 0, that means that x can be equal to negative 2, x can be negative 3, and x can be negative 4, and those are your zeros on your function. So you have to find out what multiplies to this, gives you the original function. Basically, just divide it. Okay. So I'm going to divide this. So I have the x cubed gives you 1. The x squared is negative 9. The x is 8. And the c is 60. And here, the value that goes outside here is negative 2 because x is equal to that. So I just drop 1. And multiply to that, I get negative 2 here. And I get negative 11. Multiply to that, I get 22. So that gives me 30. Multiply to that, I get negative 60. So I get 0. So then that becomes 1x squared minus 11x plus 30, 0 remainder. So it goes in evenly. There is no remainder. So when I divided this, I get x squared minus 11x plus 30. All right. So what that means is this thing times this thing gives you that. It's the same thing. I just broke it down. Now I can factor this some more. Now it's factorable because it looks like it's a quadratic. So I'm going to factor that, and I can get my other zeros, right? So I factor that, I get something like this. X and x minus 6 minus 5. Yeah, that's right. So here I have all three factors, right? So this thing is just x plus 2 times x minus 5 times x minus 6. That's all that what this work gave us. Okay, so we divide it by this first guy, and we get this, and this guy broke into these two guys. And now we see the little factors of this function. If you don't believe me, you can take all these three and multiply it back together. You will get this. It's just like saying, what multiplies to be 12? 2 times 2 times 3, right? That gives you 12. So we just broke it into little guys. So here are the little guys. And from these guys, we can find out our zeros. The first one, the 0 is -2. This one, the 0 is 5. And this one, the 0 is 6. So my zeros of the function is right here. -2, 5 is here, and 6 is here. So my function looks something like this. There you go. It crosses at those points. There's something like that. So we don't know anything else, but we know that it crosses at these 3 points. All right, so we'll do one last one. Here they give you the function, and they give you a 0. Again, with that 0, it's just saying that x plus 1 is equal to 0. So x is equal to -1. That's all it's saying. And so what times this gives you this? So I have to take this and I divide it by x plus 1. So take x to the 4th minus 4x cubed minus 14x squared plus 36x to the first power plus 45. All of that divided by x plus 1. And I get something over here. And once I get that thing, I can factor that to get it into like little guys, and then that will give me the zeros. I could factor this guy too, but then I don't know how, actually, because not all polynomials are factorable, right? So we can't factor this guy. But if we could factor it, we would just factor it and find all the zeros. But we can't right now. So I have to do synthetic division. So x to the 4th gives me 1. X to the 3rd gives me -4. And then x squared gives me -14. X gives me 36, and the constant is 45. And then I put a -1 out here, because x is equal to -1. So I drop the 1 and multiply, I get -1. Add these, I get -5. Multiply these, I get +5. Add them, I get -9. Multiply, I get +9. Add together, I have 45, and multiply, I get -45. Add that, you get 0. So 0 is the remainder. So that's gone. So I have this. It's one exponent lower than this one. So it's going to be 1x cubed minus 5x squared minus 9x plus 45. No remainder. Okay. So that is this here. The result of the division. Oops. Cubed x squared minus 9x plus 45. Now I just factor this guy and I find out the rest of the zeros. So I think I can factor by grouping here. All right, so I can take out x squared here, and I have 3 minus 5. 3. So I have x minus 5. And I take out a -9, and I have x minus 5. So then that becomes x squared minus 9 times x minus 5. And I break this down some more. That becomes x plus 3, x minus 3. Right, because it's the difference of squares. So these are my zeros along with this. So that one is a -1. And this one is a +3. This one is a -3. And this one is a 5. So I have +3, -3, -4, and positive 5. So my function looks something like this. Something like that.